when I was a student worker in Canada, I had a staff member who was always overwhelmed, overstretched, and exhausted. And I couldn't get him to relax. He was very tired. We were doing work with students. We were young. He shouldn't be tired. So I spoke to his pastor one day because I was concerned about him. And I said, what can I do about Brett, who's so exhausted? He said, this happens to people who are gift-oriented rather than task-oriented. And that's the main thing I'm going to speak about today. So I told him, what does that mean? He says this man has many gifts, and he feels committed to God to use all his gifts. So whenever there's something that can express his gifts, he feels obligated to do it. So he can preach, he can teach, he can counsel, he can do this. He does everything that he's gifted to do. As a result, he's going in 6 directions. He's not focused on the task or the calling of God. He was a student worker, high school worker, and he was doing many other things. And since then, that was about 40 years ago, I've been thinking about this and developing it and watching people. Because in Egypt, Christian leaders do not burn out. We don't have the idea of burnout. They just get exhausted. I mean, when it's not in your concept, we don't take sabbaticals, you don't necessarily take a day off. I mean, all of these things, if you don't see other people doing them, you don't feel you should do them. So people work all the time. And it seems like to be a good Christian worker, you must be exhausted. So you ask someone, how are you doing? Oh, fine, I'm doing well. Then you must not be really dedicated. You're not really dedicated to Jesus if you're not overwhelmed, exhausted. And yet you see we have, I'm going to use this example just to surprise you. The richest family in Egypt are a family of a father and his 3 sons. They're all Christians. And the mother is a real believer. The mother, she's a friend of ours. They're the richest family in Egypt. Okay? And they live a very relaxed life. You don't see them exhausted or overwhelmed. And they are people who are very, very focused as businessmen. One son is in telecommunications, the other son is in contracting, and the other son is in tourism. Very specialized. And each of them keeps to the task he does. And the father is the big boss. And, when you talk, one of the sons is very articulate. He does interviews on radio. And he says, every day I have lunch with my father. His father is 85. And he says, I share with him what I'm doing. And you feel they're relaxed. The way rich people should be. But I know other rich people who are just, you feel they're not living. And they're making more money, buying more companies, very, very excessively busy. I mentioned that about Christians because people think we as Christians are persecuted in Egypt. We can't be too persecuted if the richest family are Christians, and we are 10% of the population and Christians own 30% of the businesses in Egypt. So it just gives you a feel for our situation in Egypt. So as I thought about this, I'm going to share a few principles, but they're all based around this idea of the difference between being gift and task-oriented, and we'll have lots of time for your questions. I'll speak for about less than half an hour, and we'll have 20 minutes for questions, maybe more. So what is a gift-oriented person? As I said, it's a person who believes that fulfilling their gifts is the main criterion of job satisfaction. The job he's in should be a job that helps him fulfill his gifts. If he can't fulfill his gifts in his job, then he does his job, but he finds other things to fulfill gifts he has. A young lady I know, she's a very, very, very gifted preacher. Very, very gifted person, and extremely gifted. And she just turned 40. She has 4 children, 4 boys. And I keep telling her, slow down. You have your whole life to live. She said, no, I don't have my whole life to live. I don't want to miss out on the opportunity. And she's very gifted. She's trained, she teaches, she preaches, she does. And she's exhausted, all the time exhausted. But she feels she's duty-bound to use the gifts God has given her. And she's duty-bound to be fulfilled, because in the secular world, the idea is, I need to be fulfilled. I need to be doing things where most of what I do is what I really am, is my core gifting. And when you think, most people in Christian leadership are multi-gifted. There are very few people who just have one very specific gift to do. Most of us multi-gifted. And the main thing to do in terms of being gift-oriented, is to think of your life in a longer range situation. And think of it this way. God has called you to a task. So his calling is more important than your gifting. If you're sure God has called you to something, and he knows you can do it, he's not going to call you something to do it, you may have to use, and listen to me very carefully on this, you may have to use your secondary gifts to accomplish the task that God has called you to. I'll use a good example. I find my greatest satisfaction in leading small group Bible studies. I love getting people into the scriptures. I love it if I sit with a group and they discover, the aha, the wow, and helping them through good questions to dig into the scripture. This is one of my giftings and one thing I love to do. I haven't done it for about 20 years. I mean, on a continual basis. Because I'm heading up an organization we have 220 staff, we have 9 branches, we have budgets, we have fundraising, we have problems with the government. I'm managing a big staff of very gifted people. And if I neglect my role as management, I lose it. Because I have staff who are very, very smart. And they want my leadership. And they want me to spend time with them, to work with them through what they're doing. John Maxwell said on leadership, this is an aside, that a leader is someone whom his followers feel adds value to them. If your follower doesn't feel you add value to him, then you're not a leader. So to add value means to be a good, responsible leader for them. It's not my primary gift. My primary gift is not running an organization with big budgets and all sorts of. I can do it. I have gifting to do it. But it's not what makes me most satisfied. However, I get satisfied through the success of my staff in accomplishing the task. I got maybe 20 pictures and videos last night till very late at night from staff who have been at a big event in the Bible Society. And I wish I could have been there. As I look at the success of that event, there were maybe 1,000 young people. It was a very special, big event with a Bible quiz and things, and the staff were very excited. So they keep sending me, everybody sends me WhatsApps last one came at 2:30 in the morning. I saw it this morning. They were like, when my staff are excited and doing well, I get fulfilled. Because that's what God has called me to. But I wish I could do what they're doing. I can't. So God has called me to a task. I have to be faithful to the task. I learned that also from the head of a Bible Society in England. When I told him I was going to head the Bible Society in Egypt, it was Tom Houston. And he wrote me a very long letter. And he said, look, you can either be a publisher, which is your calling as the head of a Bible Society, or a public figure, a Christian leader, a figure inside. You can use the Bible Society to catapult you into fame. You're famous in the society. You're speaking here, giving interviews, doing this, doing that. He said you have to choose. You can't do both. And that was 27 years ago or more. I decided I have to be the best publisher in Egypt for the Bible. And that's what I focused on, that's what I've been working on. And I refuse to do interviews, I refuse to have my picture in newspapers, I refuse to take a public position, for other reasons as well. But that's a deliberate plan for this. Because a task-oriented person really believes that he is going to focus all the gifts he has or doesn't have. You expand your gifts. And one of the brilliant things of being here for me, just this week, a testimony, I've learned a lot this week. I came here for myself. And I went to the organization leaders track, and I've learned so much. I took notes. I want to go look at the videos. I want to be a better leader. But I chose the workshops and the seminars that would help me in my role heading up the Bible Society. I have a master's in counseling. I used to do a lot of counseling. I've written a couple of books on counseling. I would have loved to go to the counseling track. I would have loved to go to things on psychology. I would have loved to learn more. But that's not what God has called me to at this point. At a time in my life, I was doing small group Bible studies. At the time in my life, I was doing counseling. And during that time of those 10 years in Egypt and the years in Canada when I was doing student work, it was a one-to-one. And student work is counseling. I very firmly believe that the years I didn't have an office, I didn't have a secretary, I just worked out of my house. When my daughter was asked when she was small, what does your father do? She said he fixes things around the house. She had no concept. Student work. What's student work? He has visitors come and visit him, and he fixes things around the house. It didn't have much prestige, But those years, now 30 years later, I see the fruit of those years. I think what I did in the 10 years in Egypt, working with students, young people, is maybe more significant for the kingdom what I'm doing heading up the Bible Society. What I'm heading up the Bible Society, I'm doing for a big task. But when I see the lives of people who are students, whom God influenced, I'll give you one example to encourage you. And again, at that time, I felt exactly the opposite. I left Canada. I was on the Lausanne committee. I was known as a leader. I was going to all sorts. I came back to Egypt, and nobody, what do you do? I help students. What's InterVarsity? What's IFES? So I went from there to there, you know. But that's what God had called me to. And I worked very hard in those years to invest in the lives of students. Now most of these students are key leaders in Egypt, and even around the world in other places. And I get surprised by seeing them. I have to take appointments to go to one of them. He's the leading Protestant statesman in the Middle East. I have to make an appointment to see him. I have to go to his office. He doesn't have time to come to my office. He was a student I spent 2 years with, and with another student going through the Lausanne occasional papers. The Lausanne Congress had published papers, and I had been on Lausanne for many years. And so we did this study together. After 2 years, I told my wife I wasted my time on these two men. I said, I don't think they're going to amount to much. They have too many questions. They're too unsure of themselves. You know, I want gung-ho, real leader types. Now the two of them, one's the head of missions in a big university in Canada, the head of the missions department. He's one of the best spokesmen for missions in the Middle East. And the other one is this big leader heading up the biggest NGO in Egypt and much other work. And I look at them and I say, it was God's work. But I had a small part, and I feel very satisfied. You know what I mean? Because I can praise the Lord through their success. I don't appear, but it's through their success. So that period of my life was investing in people. Now, I cannot do the same thing. I invest in my leaders and my staff, and I hope I do the same thing. But I'm trying to keep the Bible Society of Egypt as one of the better Bible societies in the world, and for that, I have to put aside. So task-oriented people have to put aside gifts they would like to use for a different period of their lives. I'm waiting impatiently to be replaced at the Bible Society so I can do in the last years of my life the things I enjoy doing, you know. If you want to pray for me, that's my main prayer request, to find relief from this situation. Now, so the first point is to focus on being task rather than gift-oriented. If you want to not be overwhelmed, not be exhausted, be very sure what God has called you to, and put all your efforts in that thing. I mean, I don't mean 100%, but maybe 80% of your effort in that thing. Say no to committees, to travel, to other things that are not related to your primary. Maybe you do one trip a year or one thing that's not related. But most of the way I decide what conference I go to, what things I do, I talk to my staff, does it either build me up as a better person for this task, or does it contribute to the Bible Society of Egypt? These are the two criteria. So I need to be built up, and I need to focus on the organization. But if it's just a nice event, I'd like to go to a nice place in Switzerland to give Bible talks or something, and it doesn't have either of these, I say no. It's very easy to decide, and I decided as a group. So the first thing is to focus on being task rather than gift-oriented, and be determined to do that. It's a sacrifice. It is a sacrifice, and I don't find it easy, but very fulfilling in the long run. Now, to do that, you have to really believe and trust the Lord that there may be a time in your life when you will be able to use those gifts. But don't be gift-driven. Be calling-driven. And that's a very, very important. It doesn't fit the human psychology you find in America or in other places. It says you need to be fulfilled. You need to completely, I mean, some reason why people get divorced is because they're not completely fulfilled. A woman says, well, I have 3 kids and I have a husband and I have so many gifts, I don't want to be fulfilled. You're now called to be a mother. Be a wonderful mother and wife. These kids are going to go soon from the house. You will have time to do the other things. But you see too many, men or women, but mainly women who feel trapped with kids and so on, not wanting to spend the 10, 15 years of raising those kids because she's afraid she's going to lose it and not using all her gifts. And a wife, not a housewife, sorry, she may have a job and be a mother, but a father or a mother who doesn't see their parenting role as a priority is in trouble. And just on that also, it means that if you're a father, if you're a mother, you may have to get a lower level job, not accept every promotion for the man and the wife, so that you can concentrate on your kids. You know, so that when your kids are older, they'll never say, you neglected me. You know, my wife and I, by God's grace, did that, but it was a time I was doing the student work, it was a time I was doing one-to-one ministry, so I could do it. If it was now, if I was heading up the Bible Society with 2 small children, I wouldn't have been a very good father. So God had his timing. So if you're in that position, roll back. Refuse promotions. Refuse your team leader or your mission leader giving you bigger responsibilities. I have 2 small kids. I have family. I'll do this in 10 years. Problem is, he says, if you don't take it now, someone else will take his position. And you won't get promoted. That's okay. That's not my problem. It's God's problem. God has called me to be a father. He's called me to be in ministry, but I have to do. So the second point then, the first is to focus on task rather than gift. The second is to refuse anything which distracts you from that calling. And that is the hardest thing. Because every day people ask you to do things that tickle your ego. We have planned a conference and you are the best person who can speak at this conference. And we want someone just with your gifts to come. Or we need you on this committee because you are the best person. And you begin, and the way people ask you to do things make you feel important and make you feel indispensable. And they're usually your friends, so to say no is to disappoint a friend. And he says, you know, I really need you for this. And you say no. That will not be, maybe 10 years from now I'll do it, but I cannot do this now. Very, very hard to say this. Very hard. So this needs, I believe, a renewing of the mind, not to conform. You know the thing in Romans, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I think, to me, I always have to put the brakes on. Because people say, we want you here, we want you there. And I see some friends of mine. They're going here, they're going there, they're doing it all the time, preparing to go to a conference. And 2 things happen. They get exhausted, their family gets upset at them, and the people they lead, their staff, are upset also. They say the boss is never there. The leader is never there. He's going and doing all sorts of things all the time. So it becomes, you disappoint a lot of people so as to fulfill the desires of people who make you feel important. So I believe that only task-oriented people who know their calling can say no. And can say it confidently. I don't even pray about it. When someone said, would you pray about coming to conference? I said, I look at it, I think of it, I say, this doesn't fit into what God has called me to do during this period. Thank you, but no thank you. And they get upset, won't you pray about it? No. No, because I know what my calling is. And I've had this happen also in job offers, because at a certain stage in your life, if you're very successful, you get a lot of job offers. I told my secretary a few years back, because she was getting these things, I told her, in a few years, I won't get any job offers anymore. I'll be too old. And I haven't been getting job offers. But I used to, a period of my life, I got a lot of job offers. And she would be worried. Are you going to leave or so? I said, no, we just say no. And she'd say, but aren't you going to think about it, pray about it? I said, no, I know what God has called me to do. I don't have to pray about it. So I said, no, regardless what the job is, you know. Because I know exactly what God has called me to, so I know how to say no. But if I don't, if I hesitate, it doesn't mean that I'm enjoying everything I do, brothers and sisters. It doesn't mean that I enjoy firing people. I've fired 35 people in my 27 years. Some have been crooks, some have been thieves, some have had immoral problems. They've been my friends sometimes. Very dirty business. To fire Christians whom you trusted in church leaders, they're leaders in their churches, and they've done terrible things. You know, I don't like this. I'd rather resign and have someone else do it. You know, I've had to worry about budgets, raising money, meeting things, the police, the army, the tax people, all sorts of things. It's not what I want to do. So you don't necessarily have to be doing what you like to do to be fulfilling God's calling. You have to be doing what you believe. It's like a sense of destiny. God has called you to it, to that task. And as I said, it doesn't have to be all your life. There need to be maybe stages in your life. And it doesn't have to peak at certain times. So gift-oriented people see every invitation as an opportunity to exercise their gifts. A Christian leader, when I came to Egypt, I had a friend who was a very gifted Bible teacher. He was loved all over Egypt. He was a medical doctor. He did surgery. And he would usually start his He would do his surgery in the daytime, then go and teach at the university, then go to his clinic in the evening, and finish his clinic at about 3 in the morning. It's because it's so popular and people come. So I told him, I said, how do you decide when to say yes and when to say no? He said, I believe that every time someone phones me and invites me to speak at a church, it is God asking me to do it. And I try to say yes to every request I get. I felt he was wrong. He's a great man, I respect him, but I felt he was wrong. I don't think he's right. I don't think everybody calling you is necessarily a call from God. And he was, and in those days, he's now retired, he was very exhausted. Because he worked all day and he did all this, and it was very, very exhausting. But he felt it's a call. And as I said, it's mostly the family and children who suffer. When we had very young children, it was before some of you were born, telephones, we didn't have cell phones or any of this thing, but telephones were tied by a wire to the wall, and they weren't even plugs. So you couldn't pull the phone away from the plug, and it would always ring if it rang. So I got a little light switch and put it on my telephone. So when we sat as a family to have our devotions or prayer, I'd turn off the phone. And when we moved to Egypt, we didn't have a telephone for 6 years. So people would come to us, when they wanted us, they had to come to our house. So I put a wire, I came on the bell and put another switch. When we had our devotions, we'd switch off the bell. They bang, they ring, too bad. And it doesn't matter who it is. The priority is to pray with my children and to spend time with them. And our kids appreciated that. They knew that we were not, just responding to things. They were our priority. And even if a person has come from a long way and wants to see us, too bad. We have to have priority. Otherwise, once you break the rule, you can never overcome. Because in Egypt, we have, Cairo has 22 million people, and we know more people than we want to know. It's true. I mean, if I have 220 staff. Imagine if I went to every one of their occasions, their weddings, their kids' weddings, their funerals. I mean, everyone may have 2 funerals every year of 220, and they have kids' events, and they have all sorts of things. It's impossible. So my secretary and I have to decide who do I go to and who don't I go to, and how do I do it. Very difficult. Very difficult. I have to disappoint people. You see, saying no disappoints people. And you have to have the courage to disappoint people if you're going to fulfill God's calling for your life. And disappointing people makes you feel bad and makes people upset at you. But that's the lesser evil, you see? And people have put up with me. They said this guy went to Canada and came back with strange ideas. Because it is rude in Egypt not to say yes. It's also very rude not to be the one to answer your phone. I don't answer my phone. I mean, as a result, people have given up phoning me. They know when someone phones me and says, I want to meet you. I say, oh, very nice, yes, I'd love to meet you. Please phone my secretary. What do you mean? I said, because I don't know. I'm not in control of my agenda. She has the details, and she will find a suitable time. Somebody sends me an email. I forward it to her. And they get an answer from her, not from me. Now, this is very, very countercultural in our Middle Eastern culture. It looks snobbish. It looks rude. I fortunately have a wonderful assistant, and she's very gracious, and people love her. So that's very good. When she was having babies, I brought in another girl, and people didn't like her very much. So you have to have someone who knows how to handle people. But she's very gracious. He'd love to see you. Let's see where we can schedule it. And so people now, when I see them, they say, I don't want to speak to you. I'll call Hanan to get an appointment with you. They know now, even my friends. They say, we'll call her. And the same, you can imagine, we serve all the churches of Egypt, and all the Christian workers. Maybe 30,000 people who have accounts with us in the Bible Society. So at first, when I first started 27 years ago, I get a phone call. Yes, what do you want? Oh, I want 500 Bibles for an event. What discount can you give me? They want a special discount. I'm the boss. Well, very soon, I was spending my time giving discounts. And I didn't particularly want to do that. So I came up with a thing. I told my board, take away from me the right to give discounts. So I can't give discounts. So they made a decision, you can't give discounts. So the person answers, oh, that's very nice, but I can't give you a discount because I don't have that authority. Speak to the salesman. But you mean he has more authority than you? I said, yes. He can give a discount, I can't. I don't even know the price of the books. So over the years, these phone calls have decreased. They still get them. I got one last week. He wasn't happy with the discount someone gave him. He said, I know the boss. So he said, I know, I phoned you because I told them I know the boss, I can get a good discount. I said, I'll disappoint you. I can't give you a better discount than she gave you. So I'm very sorry. You can't give a better discount? I said, no. I said, as a matter of fact, I don't even know the regulations. I don't know the price of the book. He was disappointed in me. His friend couldn't give him a discount. But if I said yes, I'd have 500 people wanting discounts. And that's not what I want to spend my time doing. And my wife helps being the break when I get tempted. When I try to break these regulations, she gives me a very, very hard time. Do you really want to go to this conference? Do you really want to do this? You know, and sometimes I don't do things just to get peace with my wife. I'm going to finish and then we'll ask questions, okay? Because if we start questions, I'm nearly done. Okay, in that part of leadership, one of the principles I've also found that saves a lot of time is to, as a leader, be a communicator rather than an information giver. I learned this from an engineer, an electronics engineer once. And he was saying that communication is telling the essential thing that a particular person needs, no more and no less. So he used a very good example. He said, if you are thinking of buying a car, and you go to the car salesman, and you're going to check many salesmen. So you say, how much is this car? He says it's $15,000, $532 and 55 cents. He's lost you. That information is not the information of someone asking about the price of a car. It's the information you may put on the contract. But the information you say, it's around he should say around $15,000. And my engineer friend was saying, this is how to economize in transmission. He said, saying 15,532, this kind of thing takes a lot of bandwidth space. So he said, we tell people in communication to keep it short and communicate the essential communication. So one of the problems with Christian leaders, and you've heard preachers that way, and maybe some of you have pastors that way, they dump on you all the information they discovered in 20 hours of studying for the text. You don't want to know it. You don't want to know who said such and who did that, and you don't want to know the author of every quote necessarily. This is not a paper in which you can plagiarize. You know, they can just say someone said, but you don't have to say such and such a person said. That already takes more time than the congregation needs to know. So often when I listen to a preacher, I think he's dumping on me his research because he feels sorry that he spent so many hours discovering these great things. And it's not that he wants to show off, it's that he wants to pass on all these wonderful things to us. We don't have 20 hours to listen. We have a 20-minute sermon. And so he needs to think, what is the essential communication I need to tell the person I'm with? So to choose essential communication is a way of saving a lot of time in your effort. Like, I'm just choosing 4 points to share with you today. As I prepared this, I had 30 points. I've lived a very long time. I have a lot of principles that I think are very important. I had to choose 4 of them because I said we only have so much time and their attention span won't last beyond 4 points, other than saying fair. But I really believe there are 30 important things I could share with you today. But I had to choose 4 of them. Because I want to communicate, I don't want to give information. Giving information, unless you're a scholar who needs that information, is most time useless. And it distracts from the core. The work of a communicator is to squeeze out of the information the principles that we need. One of our big problems in pastors preaching and a lot of things is we don't communicate principles. Jesus, you know, you'll never forget Jesus' parables, right? You only hear once the lost sheep or the prodigal son, and you remembered it, right? But how many sermons have you heard, and by Wednesday when someone asked about you, you don't remember it? Jesus was a master communicator. He had the principle. Every parable had a principle in it. So he had the principle, the story, and the principle, or a principle illustrated by a story. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's a principle. And then he says, the Good Samaritan. Genius of communication. And that's what we need to be doing so that we don't give communication. But it's how would I say? It is countercultural because we are in an age where we like to show that we've really done the homework. We don't want to sound simple. we sometimes, and you have that problem more in Europe than we do in the Middle East, you want to sound scholarly, sound like you've really done everything. So to summarize something very complex in 4 simple principles seems like, this guy isn't very smart. But actually, that's what communicates. And that's how, remember they said he doesn't teach like the Pharisees. They would quote and book and chapter and the information. And at the end, you say, what's he trying to say? What's he trying to say? You remember sessions like this. You get out of it, someone says, what did you... Well, he said some very nice things, but he didn't get it. So the communicator is someone who enlightens people, and he communicates principles and basic idea rather than information. And that saves a lot in... It takes pressure off you of having just to keep dumping information on people. And it's one of the very important leadership. And finally, the leader's task, I believe, is to be an opportunity opener. I think a gifted leader mobilizes people to the task. And one of the ways you don't get overwhelmed is by delegating tasks to others in a way that will make them own their responsibility. So many bosses, particularly in the Middle East, when they talk about delegation, they are telling someone to do something and they're keeping the leash very tight. So you do something and tell me what you did, and you come back and I'll tell you what to do next. So this is not delegation. This is like the captain following his team. You go there and then come back. You go there and you come back. It's like the grocery store owner, I've had staff like this who do this. They give very short instructions and then the person has to come back to them. The person can't. So you try. You go to an office of someone or a Christian leader and you want to make an appointment. And they say, but he's too busy to speak to you now. I say, I don't want to speak to him. I want to make an appointment, but only he does the appointment. So you have to phone the person, and it takes you hours to get to him, so that you make the appointment. Only he makes the appointment. I have a pastor like that. And for years, I told him, let your secretary make your appointments for you. No. She may get the wrong people. So he's overwhelmed, very overwhelmed. So delegation means you give someone a responsibility and authority as much as the responsibility. Not less, not more. Commensurate authority. So you say, you're responsible for this, and you have a full authority for what you're responsible for, and I never interfere with you. If I don't like it, I'll tell you later, and I won't cancel what you did in the past, but I'll tell you in the future, please be careful, this is not exactly how it should be done. But I'll never cancel, unless it's a disaster, a decision he's made in the past. So he knows he's responsible. She knows she owns it. And she can make that decision and will not be humiliated or overruled. So to delegate is not to abdicate. Very important, because some leaders abdicate. What do you mean abdicate? They said in the office, oh, you do this, khalas. They don't know anything. And then you get a lot of problems. Because to abdicate, to give up your responsibility, you don't give up. You sit with a person and say, what did you do, how did it go? But you know exactly where you come in and where they come in. And that's a very, very, very important way of not being overwhelmed. Because so many people, they have a lot, let's say someone like myself, I have a lot of staff, but then I end up being overwhelmed, even though I have so much staff. Because I end up doing what others should be doing, but because I don't completely trust them. And the trick is, nobody will do things exactly the way you do them. And they are going to learn by experience. And if you're going to be a real leader and delegate, you have to risk. And you have to accept a degree of things going wrong. Even if you did it yourself, things will go wrong. Why don't you allow other people to do wrong? And if they do wrong, you pick up the pieces with them and you work. Now the trick in this, of course, they say the best time to fire someone is when you hire them. The trick is to have the right people. And of course, we've all made big mistakes in hiring people. And the only thing I can say about hiring people is a very simple thing. Character is much more important than competence. Now, competence is very important. But many, many people in their CVs and all their things prove their competence. And they seem phenomenally competent. So people get impressed and hire them. And they have a lousy character. They can't get along with anybody. And what succeeds in teams and things is people who get along well. You know, you need the smooth work. And it's taken me a very long time at the Bible Society in Egypt to get the right team together. Because you always have one person who he wants to do it on his own. He doesn't care about the others. And it stops. You know, it's a grinding wheel. The cogs don't fit. You know, I keep putting the oil in, but sometimes it doesn't work because he doesn't want, or she doesn't want to fit. So character in hiring, and I've spoken to many HR people, is more important than competence. You can increase someone's competence. You can rarely improve their character. So what you need to ask about the person, how did he get along with others, you know, all these kind of things before you ask where he's come. The other thing in hiring someone, they say that people will eventually do what they like to do. So you have to make sure that what you're giving them to do is something they like, or else they're going to change the job into something else. Do the task you've given them in 5 minutes and spend an hour doing something else. And it may have nothing to do with their people. Many people have professions, but they're not their avocation. So they spend a bit of time in their profession. What they really like to do is to garden, or to sing, or to teach. Or their profession is just a way to make money. So when you hire someone in the Christian work, and it's not the core part of what he wants to do, it's a big problem. Now you'll say I'm contradicting myself because I told you I'm doing some things that are not in my main area of gifting. There's a very big difference between gifting and calling. I'm very convinced that God has called me to this position. And I'm very convinced I'm the best person now to lead the Bible Society in Egypt, you know. So I'm convinced I'm there. It's just that God has put me in a place where I have to sacrifice some of my gifts. It doesn't mean I'm not satisfied with my task and I'm excited about leading the Bible Society. But I've seen people who are in the job, but that's not really what they want to do, and they haven't accepted that. So they do their job in a minimalist way. It's not good. It's passable. And then they do other things that have nothing to do with their job. In the job, they make their office do something else, counseling the staff. Everybody's coming to be counseled by them, or they're deciding, they're planning weekends and things. They're doing things that that are nice, but they're neglecting their main task and they're doing the other things. So if you're not going to be exhausted, and I'll summarize and listen to your questions, you need to, first of all, believe that you're going to focus on God's calling and not on your gifts. You're going to therefore be able to refuse what distracts you from your calling. You're going to be able to communicate to others or to think exactly what needs to be done and not just simply waste time in giving information. You're going to infuse others, and I'll close with this, to turn obstacles into opportunities. A good leader, once he has given the gift of a leader who has well-employed people, so you've said you've given them the responsibility and give them authority as much, then when they find a closed door, a problem, your task as leader is to help them see the opportunities. You're always opening up opportunities for people. You're giving vision. And when the staff member is discouraged, when someone comes to you, instead of being discouraged with them, you see beyond. You think outside the box. We say in Egypt, when the door is closed, we look for a window. And we jump through a window. Because you can very much quickly look at the empty side of a glass. And staff members who look at the empty side of a glass can get you very discouraged quickly. The glass is half empty. I say, but yeah, but it's also half full. So let's look at let's be positive. So being positive saves energy. It saves discouragement. It saves being overwhelmed. I'm not saying being simplistically positive. I'm not saying just being enthusiastic, but being able to look at life, at a situation, from its positives. And that's the way also you look at people. You look at their positives and build on them. Now, everything I've told you, I've often failed to do. So I'm still striving to do it.